What is up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another podcast episode today. For those of you who are on YouTube, you can also see that I'm recording this episode with video as well, and I plan to do that from here on out. So for those of you who would like to watch me and see my lovely face, you're welcome to do that on YouTube. But also, I'll continue to do just audio formats of this podcast on things like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So for those of you who just want to listen to it, you can still continue to do that as well. But I simply wanted to broaden the horizon for those of you who want a video podcast versus just an audio one, as well as better for me because it gives me more practice talking into the camera. And even though I've been doing it now for like 2 years, it still can be quite challenging talking straight into a camera sometimes. Especially for me, my speech is not always the best. I tend to talk fast and slur my words. So this podcast, hopefully will help me improve in those areas, learn to slow down, speak clear, and do better by talking to the camera as well, because here in the podcast there is way less editing and way less cuts, so you're just kind of seeing and hearing the raw me. In YouTube videos, let's just say I don't do things necessarily on the first shot. Usually there's like 5 to 10 shots of the same shot to give me the exact one that I want to use that looks the best and sounds the best. So here in the podcast, there's none of that. You're getting me as I am and how I sound. So hope you guys enjoy it. And like I said, hopefully I'll get better at this whole presentation of sounding and looking better for the camera and for you guys. So anyways, today I simply wanted to give you a recap of how my race went in Gig Harbor this past weekend for the Gig Harbor Paddlers Cup here in Washington State. Now this race took place in a bay, and even though it is parted or is still connected to technically the ocean, here in the Washington or Seattle area, this bay was still in a very protected part of the water, and it was also a very small one. So because of that, it helped actually reduce the amount of wind that can enter the bay area. And we went to a time of day as well when the current was not dropping or raising too much. So there wasn't a whole lot of current to deal with, which is super nice for race day conditions. Now, there were several races for this day as well. The first day, which was on Saturday, we did 2 races. We did a 10K course as well as a sprint knockoff rounds as well. And then the second day on Sunday, we did a tech race course. So the first race that took place was a 10K race course. And for all these races except for Sunday, so for the 10K race, the 5K, which took place at the same time as the 10K, and then for the sprint knockoffs, majority of these races were designed and actually held for people who are in kayaks or canoes. And us paddleboarders were just simply allowed to join in on the fun and compete as well. But let's just say we were very much among the minority when it came to this race day. When we all stood up and got lined up for the 10K race, I think I saw there was around 130 paddlers on the water for the start line. And there was only roughly between, I think it was like 15 to 18 paddleboarders. So as you can see, there were way more people in kayaks and canoes in that water for the race versus those of us on paddle boards. So because of that, that made for a super interesting 10K race. Especially as I said earlier, since this race took place in a smaller harbor, we actually had to do laps in order to get a full complete 10K, which the truth was at the end of the race was actually only just over a 9K race, just because the course ended up being a little bit smaller than planned. But regardless of that, we actually had to do 4 laps for what was supposed to be this 10K race. And there were a total of 6 buoys out there on the water. So the reason they did 6 buoys was allowed it to kind of make the curve or the corner of the loop more rounded for those in kayaks and canoes to be able to make the big turn as it go back around again for another loop. So it's almost like a big version of like a track and field track for this 10K race. And so with that being said, at the start line, when we all lined up to take off for the race together, they actually started both the 10K and the 5K together. So for the 5K people, they went out and they did 2 laps around the loop, and then they exited and finished the race. And those of us who were doing 10K, we went for another 2 laps to do the 10K race. So anyways, we're all out there together, and we all get lined up. I try to find a pretty good position to get me lined up to head towards that first buoy for the first corner, which is roughly 400 meters away. So it's not super far away. So I get myself into a good position, try to find some space between me and the other people and kayaks and canoes and paddleboards around me to make sure I have space for my paddle blade to go in the water. Get good clean catches and good clean paddle strokes to power me up to get to that first buoy as fast as possible for good positioning. So anyways, I find a good spot, getting lined up. We're all waiting for the race to start. And if you've ever been in mass start races, you know at that start line, everyone is jittery and just ready to go for that race. And at this day as well, there were a variety of people from all ages, and the vast majority were youth, because this program this race actually held to raise, I believe, funds for these youth programs that are going on for their kayaking and canoeing clubs. So with that, there was a ton of youth out there, a ton of us older adults out there as well, and just a wide variety. But everyone, as I said, was itchy and ready to go to start this race. And as we were waiting for the countdown to start the race, I believe someone yelled out, "Go," in the crowd. Don't know who, don't know why, but because of that, literally half the amount of people took off to start this race that hadn't officially started yet. So with that being said, the first group took off to start this race, and I'm standing there just looking around like, are they going to call everybody back? Are they going to say just go? And about 3 more seconds pass, and then finally one of the officials says go, because obviously there's no way they can call everybody back, so they just say go. So with that, half the crowd took off and got a head start, and then I started off later with the other half to catch up and start this 10K/5K race for those in that one as well. So that kind of sets the scene for the rest of this race. Everyone takes off into these 2 different groups, and then we all start to merge together. These 130 people in the water start to merge together towards this first buoy on the water. So you can only imagine just how we went from being spread out to all being crammed in to go around this first buoy, or first sets of buoys, to make this first big turn and this course set up for the race. So as we get there, I get myself in what I can really just do the best of, my best positioning anyways, around all these people and their kayaks and canoes. And we all get to this first turn, and as you know, kayaks and canoes cannot turn as quickly as a paddleboard can when we can do like a pivot turn. So I'm just kind of locked in the grid. Like I'm at this first turn, I'm kind of locked in the grid with all these other people and their watercraft. And I'm just kind of going with the flow at this point, because there's literally nothing I can do to escape the crowd or get around this turn quicker, because I'm surrounded by people and all these different watercraft. So once I go with the flow and thankfully don't fall in, which is a miracle, but I make our way around this big first current turn, and we make our way to the first straightaway to the other side of the course. And that's when things thankfully start to clear out a little bit and give some space. And at this point, there was one other person named Christian who had better inside lane than I did. He came out in front of me around this first corner, or this first turn. But quickly, I was still trying to put in the powerful strokes at the beginning to get myself into a great positioning, which led me to overtake Christian and take the lead. And for the next 2 laps, I led the race for the paddleboard side of things. Now, obviously, there were a ton of people still in kayaks and canoes who can just cruise much faster than we can on paddleboards. So they were still passing us or ahead of us and making their own times for their own competition that they're in for the kayaking or canoe side of things. So we're going with the flow. I'm leading the race for the first 2 laps. Christian is tailing right behind me, behind my paddleboard, just drafting me. And we're kind of making our way, good timing around the course, putting a good amount of effort. I found a good zone to be in for my speeds for the race. And I wouldn't say this race really, as I said, for the type of race that it was, I did not really go into this race with expectations of PRing my time, because one, there were a ton of different watercraft in the water, such as the kayaks and canoes. So that's a major factor when paddling around those type of people in the water. As well as this course, as I said, was also loops. You're having to do turns throughout the entire race, which cause you to slow down as well as you're going around turns. So not the best to be trying to PR in, but with that being said, I simply took those things into consideration and found a good group to be in, and just kind of found my good motion to go around the first 2 laps. Then after that is when Christian actually overtook me, and then I drafted him for the next 2 laps towards the end of the race. So through that, we continued to go around other kayakers and canoes, and they continued to pass it as well. At one point, we were coming up to a turn where I was drafting Christian, and this kid came up in his canoe beside me, and we're approaching this turn up here, and I know for a fact that this kid obviously cannot turn as fast as we can when we're going to do a pivot turn on our paddleboard at this turn. So I just know there's going to be some kind of collision happening up here. So I try to get a few harder paddle strokes in to push me farther in front of this kid so he can go behind us. But unfortunately, when we got the turn, he still came too quickly up behind me when we got to the turn. And I don't think he was expecting me to do a quicker pivot turn. So when I stepped back in the pivot turn, got to my board turn, and went to go walk towards the middle of my board again to level things off, the top of his canoe came on the top of the back side of my paddleboard. So I'm now dragging this kid on his canoe for probably, it wasn't super far, but it was probably at least a good 20 meters or so, just pulling this kid forward until he finally falls off my paddleboard. And of course he's apologetic, which, I mean, it's all fine. It just is what it is in the race. All good. So anyways, he gets off my paddleboard. Thankfully I don't fall in. And I continue to pick up my speed again to get back on Christian's tail to follow him for what would be one more lap around the course. And then as we approach the final section of the race, on the final lap, we have probably roughly 1K left in the race again, is when I started to kick things in, push hard in my paddle strokes, overtook Christian, and then he held right behind me, drafting me for the last section, and thankfully I was able to hold him off for the rest of that race. When I first pushed around him though, I was thinking, oof, maybe I pushed too early towards the end of this race and I'm going to die off, but thankfully I was able to continue to keep that intensity up all the way to the finish line and take the win for the day. So I was super stoked about that. Christian was still an incredible paddler for that day. I really enjoyed paddling alongside him for that race and taking turns drafting. So great competitor, great athlete, and was just overall a super fun day to be on the water. It was calm conditions here in Washington that day. It was also like 65 degrees Fahrenheit. So overall, yeah, an incredible day to do a 10K race. The only unfortunate side of things was having to do it with 100 plus other people and kayaks and canoes for the race as well. But it is what it is. So I had a fun time out in the water with the local community and enjoying that whole race for what it was. All right, water break. So after that race is when they took a little bit of break. I believe it was about an hour and a half or so. And then they did the sprint knockoff rounds. So the way they designed the sprint knockoff rounds for this event was it was a pretty short sprint. It was only 100 meters long. So most sprints for SUPs usually is closer to the 200 meter mark. But this one was only 100 meters. So not quite as long. But also the way they set it up was like a knockoff round. So what they had everyone do, or had the paddlers do, people on paddle boards, was everyone line up together. So all the paddle boards lined up together, and they all raced down to the finish line. And then the last 3 people to cross the line were knocked off. Then all the paddlers literally turned around and paddled back to the start line again. They had another countdown, and they'd paddle the 100 meters again, knocked off 3 more people. The people who made it turned around, paddled back to the start line, got set up again, had a countdown, and did it again. And they did that, how many times was it? It was at least 5+ times for the sprints. And as you can tell by the way I'm telling the story, I obviously did not partake in the sprints that day. I kind of knew I was going to be tired after the 10K race. And I honestly didn't feel like doing several sprints after a 10K race, after I already pushed my body pretty hard. And so I decided not to do the sprints for that day. But kudos to all the paddlers who did do them. Deep respect for you guys. You guys did an incredible job of getting out there and pushing your bodies even harder for a sprint after you already did a hard race for a long distance on the water. So kudos to you guys. But I chose to sit out for those rounds and watch those guys and support them on the sideline. And after all said and done, those guys did super well, and they eventually came out with some winners. So that was the sprints for that day. Then the last day was on Sunday, and this was a day designed totally for people on paddleboards. So we were the only people who showed up for the race this day. There was no more kayaks or canoes. It was just us people on paddleboards because it was a tech race day. So for this tech race for this location, they had it set up to where it was a 1K course, so 1,000 meters, and there were 8 buoy turns on the course. And honestly, it was a really well laid out course. All the turns had a nice angle to them. The whole course distance was a good distance for a 10K race, in my personal opinion. And the location was there once again in the harbor. It was a different location within the harbor, but still in that protected water area. So yeah, just an incredible location to have the tech race. The weather for this day though was a little bit cooler. We did it earlier in the morning. We started the race at 8:30, and it was a little bit breezier this day. It wasn't like consistent wind on the water, but it was very gusty. And the first 2 rounds were pretty nice weather. Like, they weren't too windy, but by the third round, there were some serious gusts whipping through there, enough to kind of like push you on the water, and you had to like, you'd be setting up for a turn and then you get pushed by the wind and it would throw you off. So you have to reset up for the turn. So it made things pretty interesting, but all that being said, even kind of more fun in some ways. So for this day, for the tech racing, they had a setup to where all of us people who showed up, there was only like 18 of us on paddle boards. They're going to have all of us do the race together 5 times. And then rather than being knocked off, you would actually just be given points by the position you placed in for each race. So we would all race together, all 18 of us, for 1 lap around this course. And then depending where we place, we'd be given a certain amount of points. Then we all do it again for a total of 5 times. And yeah, let's just say it was a great workout. The first round we dove into it. I took off hard, got myself in that lead position for the first buoy turn to have clean water to work with, and got around it and kind of led the race led the people for the rest of that race as well, and really had a good first round. But after that first round too, for any kind of race where you push pretty hard like a tech race, my body was feeling it and it was tiring. I was like, how in the world am I going to do this 4 more times? So we've got a 10-minute break. The way they designed it was after the last person crossed the finish line, we then start 10 minutes for a break. And then after that 10 minutes, we line back up to start the next round. So we waited 10 minutes kind of to cool down. We lined back up. We took off for the second round with once again. Took off hard, got into lead position. Had a guy named Manny who followed me for the majority of races right at my tail. And we pushed hard around that lap. I won that second one. Then the third one we took off, and this is when the wind started to get gusty. So towards the second half of the buoy turn, so like the last 4 turns, there were a few times where I was getting set up for a turn and a gust of wind would hit me and knock off the positioning of my board. So I'd have to do like a quick stroke to correct it and then get around the buoy. Or one time I got towards the end of the race, that third time, I got around the second to last buoy, and it was just gusting hard on the side. So you're just like working hard, paddling on the one side of your board to keep your board tracking straight and to finish that race. And yeah, that was a tough one. I really felt that was my slowest time on that course for that day, was the third round of those gusts of wind. So that made things interesting. For the fourth round, once again, took off hard, continued to lead. Manny was right in my tail as well. There's a few times we came around a corner. I took things pretty slow in the turns that day. Once I was in the lead position, I kind of just eased off a little bit to try to control the pacing of the pack. And when I came up to a turn, I just kind of took my time. And there's a few times where he wanted to just kind of work it, turn a little harder than me and get around me and go. But whenever he did that, I would just kind of push hard a little bit harder again to pull back to the front and continue to lead. But once again, he did a great job tracking me that whole race and drafting me. So kudos to him. And thankfully, we finished the fourth round. And after that, the racers decided to end things. So backtracking, I forgot to mention, after the third round, we're all pretty tired. The race director asked if we would rather do 2 more rounds still for a total of 5 or just 1 more for 4. And we're all, majority vote, we're like, 1 more round. No 2 more, just 1 more. We're so tired. And so we did 1 more for the 4th round, and I won that round once again. So if you're any math whiz, you can obviously tell that, or know that with the point system set up, that I took the win in that race for the points, and then Manny took second, and then another guy named Adam took third, and everyone else obviously placed behind us. But overall, it was a super fun day. I really enjoyed this whole race and event as a whole because it was really just a race for local paddlers. And even though I enjoy going to the bigger races where there's people from all around the world or from the country, there's something about going to a local race where you get to know people around where you live who enjoy the same sport that you do, enjoy time on the water just like you do. Is something special. And I really enjoy that kind of setting where you get to know people and just have fun. Like, even though, yeah, we're out there giving it our best, we're all trying to win in the competition. But at the end of the day, it also doesn't really matter. We're there just to enjoy time with each other in the water, learn from each other, have some good laughs. For some people, have some good falls in the water as well, enjoying that cold water dip here in the Pacific Northwest. But overall, to say, it was just a weekend of great community and storytelling and getting to know each other, and yeah, lots of laughs. And so overall, even though I'm happy with the way I performed over the weekend, I'm honestly just more happy about getting to know people I got to meet over the weekend and hear their stories and be excited that the same people live where I live and get to paddle the same water that I get to paddle, and we can enjoy more time together here this summertime. So yeah, I'm super stoked about that. But that's kind of today's episode. I just want to pop on here and yeah, just give you just my take on how things went this past weekend at the Gig Harbor Paddlers Cup. I'm super stoked for the rest of the summer. My next race is going to be the Gorge Challenge here in July. And that race is going to be interesting because if you're familiar with this race, this is a downwind race, and then there's also a tech race, but it's also still can partake in some winds as well, because obviously the gorge is a very windy location. And if you've seen my YouTube series for downwinding, you know I'm very much a beginner when it comes to downwinding and those kind of conditions on the water. So I have a lot more practice to be doing from between now and then to get my downwinding skills where they need to be for this race. So I'm going to kind of focus on that for these next few months to prepare for that race, to make sure I spend more time on my board versus off my board in the water. So that's kind of the main goal. So stoked about that though. As you guys know me, like, I continue to enjoy this whole process of learning things and paddling and then repeating the process. That's my motto, is learn, paddle, repeat. And I enjoy that. I enjoy pushing myself and putting myself in new environments to learn things and grow, as well as these races to learn new things I can apply to do better for the next race and continue to get better and better as a paddler. So I love the process that this involves. I love going to new races like the Gorge Challenge to push myself in an environment that I'm not familiar with and that I need to work on. So I'm super stoked about that. But yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying the start of your summer. Hopefully, for those of you who live in the northern parts of the world, hopefully your waters are starting to thaw off by now. Hopefully the ice is starting to melt so you can get back on the water and just enjoy some time paddling. And let me know what your plans are for this summer. Are you planning to do some races? Are you planning to just work on some skills? Are you planning just to have fun with family? Like, what are some things you have planned for the summertime? I'd love to hear what those are. So hope you guys enjoy this podcast episode. Look forward to talking more about my future races. And stay tuned, because the next episode that's going to drop is going to be about the indoor SUP and talking about what that is and talking some more with Magnus himself from Kona Sports. So stoked about that. I'm going to stop talking now and stop saying so, because I say so quite a bit. So I'll talk to you guys later.